In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But even in endless darkness, there are those who chose to be light. They were not gods, though some were worshipped as such. They were not perfect, though they carried perfection within their reach. They were men, and angels, and something in between. The last sparks of hope in a universe built on despair. From the blackest night of the 41st millennium, their names still echo. The warriors, the saints, the kings, the martyrs, those who stood when empires fell, who bled so others could live, who carried humanity upon their broken shoulders. This is their story, not of conquest, but of meaning, not of power, but of purpose. From the coward who became a legend, to the angel who died with open wings. Ray to the Immortal King who still dreams upon his throne. These are, strong, the top 10 heroes of humanity. Their courage built our Imperium. Their sacrifices defined our species. Their stories remind us that even in the age of gods, it was humanity that mattered most. In the grim darkness of the far future, cowardice may be the truest form of wisdom. Imperial aphorism attributed to Commissar Ciaphas Cain. There are heroes born of prophecy, forged by divine will, chosen by destiny. And then there is Commissar Ciaphas Cain, who would tell you, quite earnestly, that he is not a hero at all. To the Imperium of man, Cain is a legend, a symbol of courage in a galaxy where hope itself is a heresy. To the men and women who fought under his command, he was the commissar who lived. And to himself, he was just a man, trying very, very hard not to die. The paradox of Cain's fame lies at the heart of his story. He did not seek glory, he sought survival. He did not charge into battle for the emperor. He ran away from certain death, and somehow, by the cruel humor of fate, always ran toward the greatest danger imaginable. Born on the hive world of Desolatia, Ciaphas Cain joined the Scrong Schola Progenium, the Imperium's infamous orphan academies, that train the children of dead officers into future leaders of the Astra Militarum, the Commissariat, and the Ecclesiarchy. He learned quickly that the best way to survive within imperial hierarchy was to appear brave, but never be the first one to die. Brat, when he was assigned as a commissar to various Imperial Guard regiments, his reputation began not through epic speeches or iron discipline, but through something far rarer, common sense. Cain's leadership philosophy was simple. Block quote. If I'm close enough to the front to shoot someone for cowardice, I'm close enough to get shot myself. Therefore, it's in my best interest to keep my men alive. That unorthodox logic saved countless regiments. Unlike many commissars who executed soldiers for retreating, Cain believed in keeping morale alive. He understood that terrified men don't fight better under fear. They fight better when they believe they might actually live. Throughout the countless campaigns chronicled in the so-called Cain archives, meticulously edited by his aide, the Inquisitor Amberley Vale, we see a consistent pattern. Cain, driven by self-preservation, attempts to avoid the front line, only to stumble directly into the most critical point of the battle. When the Tyranids invaded Gravelax, Cain tried to escape a doomed city, and ended up leading a counterattack that saved it. When Chaos cults overran the mines of Perlia, he went in to inspect logistics, and single-handedly slew a Chaos Daemon host threatening to breach reality. And on Adumbria, his strategic withdrawal accidentally cut off a Chaos advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The soldiers called him the hero of Perlia, the savior of Adumbria, the man who kills daemons and lives. Cain, in his own memoirs, dismissed every title with self-deprecating wit. Pure dumb luck, aided by the incompetence of my enemies. But Amberley Vale, ever the perceptive inquisitor, wrote in her annotations, "It is remarkable how often luck favors those who act decisively, selflessly, and with perfect timing. In a universe ruled by death cults and madness, Canis Cain's humanity is his greatest weapon. He feared death constantly. He doubted the righteousness of the Imperium. He distrusted the fanatics around him. And yet, when men looked to him for guidance, he never turned away. Because fear to Cain was not weakness, it was clarity. He once wrote, 'The man who claims he fears nothing is either a liar or an idiot. The rest of us simply learn to run toward the thing we fear, because running away never works.' Cain's courage was not born of faith, but of pragmatism. He saw the emperor not as a divine savior, but as a necessary symbol. He saluted the imperial creed not because he believed in it, but because his soldiers needed to. And in the end, that made him the most effective commissar alive, for he fought not for gods, but for men. No hero survives alone. Beside Cain stands perhaps the most memorable of sidekicks in all imperial history, Gunnar Jurgen, a malodorous, unshaven aide whose loyalty borders on the divine. Unknown to most, Jurgen is a pariah, a blank in the warp, utterly devoid of psychic presence. To psychers and daemons, he is invisible and repulsive, a living anathema to chaos itself. This one unassuming aide saved Cain's life more times than record keepers can count. Together, they formed a paradoxical duo, a cowardly hero and a humble anti-psyker, carving their way through nightmares. In a sense, Ciaphas Cain is the Imperium's greatest heretic, not because he defied the Emperor, but because he understood the truth that few could accept. The Imperium is insane. Its wars are endless. Its faith devours logic. And yet, within that madness, people still matter. Cain's memoirs, preserved under inquisitorial seal, are not chronicles of glory. They are confessions. He mocks propaganda, questions dogma, and laments the absurdity of a civilization that sends billions to die in wars no one understands. Yet, even as he laughs at it all, he still fights, he still leads, he still saves lives, because cynicism without action is cowardice, and Cain, for all his complaints, always acts. What makes Ciaphas Cain so enduring in Warhammer lore is that he represents the most honest kind of heroism. He doesn't fight because he believes in a higher calling. He fights because it's his job. Because if he doesn't, no one else will. And maybe that's what heroism truly is. Not blind faith, not divine destiny, but the willingness to do what must be done, even when you'd rather be anywhere else. In the words of Amberley Vale, if Cain is a coward, then perhaps cowardice is the only virtue left that can save us. Long after his disappearance from active duty, Cain's legend grew far beyond the truth. Statues were raised, hymns were written. Millions of soldiers invoke his name before battle, half in reverence, half in irony. For the Emperor, and for Cain. He would hate that, of course. He'd insist they've got the wrong man. But maybe, in the end, that's exactly what makes him right. He never asked to be a saint. He just refused to stop being human. And in a universe ruled by monsters, That is the rarest courage of all. Lockquote and P. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is worth more. M. Commissar Ciaphas Cain, Personal Journal, M41, 283. Fear me, greenskin, for I am the hand of vengeance made flesh. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick, Armageddon Crusade. There are names in the Imperium that evoke terror, awe, and reverence all at once. Names that even the alien races of the galaxy whisper with a primal fear. Among them stands one man, mortal, scarred, unyielding, whose very existence became a myth both to mankind and to its most savage enemy. His name is Commissar Sebastian Yarrick, the Old Man of Armageddon, the Unkillable, the Hammer of the Orcs. He was not a Primarch, not a saint, and not a psyker. He was, at his core, a human being, old, fragile, mortal. Yet he achieved what few gods have done. He made the orcs afraid. Sebastian Yarrick was born into the dying light of the Imperium's endless bureaucracy, a lifetime servant of the Commissariat, an institution feared more than loved. Commissars are the embodiment of imperial discipline, political officers whose task is to maintain order, inspire courage, and, when necessary, execute cowards. Most soldiers fear their commissar more than the enemy. But Yarrick was different. He inspired through respect, not fear. Through presence, not punishment. He didn't stand behind his men with a pistol ready to kill deserters. He stood beside them, plasma pistol blazing, chainsword roaring, eyes filled with a determination that made lesser men rise beyond their limits. In him, the soldiers of the Astra Militarum saw something they rarely witnessed. A leader, willing to die first. Armageddon, a name synonymous with the apocalypse. It was there that Yarrick's legend began, against an enemy as ancient as war itself, the Orcs. The Greenskins, led by warlord Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka, descended upon the hive world of Armageddon like a storm of iron and fury. Worlds had fallen to Orcs before, but never like this. Never with such unrelenting power and cunning. Yarrick, serving as Commissar to the Steel Legion, witnessed firsthand the horror of an Orc wog. A tide of green muscle and hatred that devoured entire cities. While others saw beasts, Yarrick saw something far more dangerous. Belief. Orcs are driven by psychic conviction. Their collective will bends reality. If enough orcs believe a gun will fire, it fires. If they believe Yarrick cannot die, then he cannot die. The war reached its climax at Hades' Hive, one of Armageddon's greatest bastions. Yarrick commanded the defense with a force outnumbered and outgunned 100 to 1. For months, they endured endless bombardment. Civilians starved, soldiers collapsed, and the skies burned green with the contrails of Orc aircraft. Still, Yarrick stood. He fought from the front lines, directing artillery fire by Vox, even as shells fell around him. When his right arm was torn from his body by an Orc knob, he didn't scream, he didn't retreat. He killed the beast, pried off its massive claw, and, later, had it grafted to his own arm. That claw became a symbol, a weapon of defiance, a promise to the Orcs that he would never bow. To the Greenskins, it was proof he was part machine, part monster, perhaps even blessed by Gork and Mork themselves. To the Imperium, It was proof of the human spirit, the will to adapt, to endure, and to defy. The orcs began to whisper a name: Yarrick the Unkillable, the Uman boss who never dies. They believed him touched by gods, unstoppable, eternal. And in the psychic gestalt of orc belief, that made it true. Yarrick's legend grew until it transcended reason. He survived wounds that would kill lesser men. He endured diseases, explosions, and duels with warlords who could crush him with a single blow. Each time he rose again, his power grew, not from sorcery or mutation, but from the enemy's own fear. In the grim irony of the 41st millennium, Yarrick's immortality was born not of divine favor, but of the orcs' imagination. They had made him a god of war, and he, being human, used that myth as his sharpest weapon. Many commissars became tyrants, zealous, cruel, obsessed with enforcing the emperor's will through terror. Yarrick was not one of them. His faith was not blind. His devotion was not fanaticism. He did not fight for glory or immortality. He fought for duty, even when the Imperium forgot him. Even when the High Lords of Terra used him as a symbol for propaganda, Yarrick remained at the front. He refused to retire, despite age, despite injury, despite the weight of endless wars. When asked why, he answered simply, "Because someone must." That phrase, "because someone must," became his creed. It is the purest expression of imperial virtue, stripped of fanaticism. Not faith, not ambition, just duty. No story of Yarrick can be told without his eternal rival, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka, the prophet of the Wagah. The two were bound by fate, enemies whose hatred became something like respect. When Ghazghkull first invaded Armageddon, he saw in Yarrick not prey, but a worthy fight. A human who fought like an orc, brutal, relentless, cunning. Yarrick became his obsession. Even after the war, Ghazghkull returned, leading a second invasion, not for conquest, but to face Yarrick again. Their rivalry defined decades of bloodshed. To the orcs, Yarrick was the greatest foe they could ever have. To Yarrick, Ghazghkull was the test of humanity's will to survive. Some say that when they finally met in personal combat, they fought for days, each refusing to yield, each sustained by pure hatred and respect. When Ghazghkull vanished into the void, Yarrick did not celebrate. He prepared, because he knew the prophet would return. Yarrick's life stretched across centuries, an unnatural longevity sustained by cybernetics, augmetics, and sheer determination. His face became a skull of metal and scar, his body a relic of battlefields long dead. He was the Imperium personified, broken, ancient, yet somehow still alive. Across dozens of crusades, he fought not just orcs, but chaos incursions, heretics, and even his own despair. He saw worlds burn. He buried friends. He outlived emperors and generals alike. But he never stopped. Because to Yarrick, war was not a choice. It was existence. The power of Yarrick's myth transcends armies. To the Astra Militarum, he was the ultimate commissar, proof that duty and humanity could coexist. To the Ecclesiarchy, he was a living saint in all but name. To the orcs, he was a monster, an eternal foe that haunted their dreams. And to the people of the Imperium, he was a symbol that even one mortal man could stand against the green tide and win. His image is carved in statues on countless worlds. Children of hive cities are taught to whisper his name as a prayer. And on every battlefield where the orcs rise again, soldiers paint his sigil upon their tanks, the steel claw and the burning eye. No one knows how Yarrick truly died. Some say he fell in battle during the Third War for Armageddon. Others whisper that he still lives, sustained by faith, hatred, and the unending war he began. There are reports of Imperial officers claiming to have seen him centuries after his supposed death, leading men into battle, his iron claw glinting beneath the fire of 1,000 guns. Perhaps the orc's belief keeps him alive. Perhaps duty alone does. Or perhaps, like all legends, Yarrick cannot die because he is no longer a man, but an... The story of Sebastian Yarrick is not just about defiance. It is about transformation. A mortal man, through sheer will, became a symbol that transcended species, faith, and death itself. He embodies the paradox of the Imperium, a civilization built on despair, sustained only by the stubborn refusal to give up. Yarrick shows that humanity's greatest weapon is not technology, faith, or power. It is sheer. He turned fear into strength. He turned myth into armor. And in doing so, he proved that the Emperor's truest servants are not angels or gods, but men who refuse to kneel. In his final transmission, recorded before disappearing during a campaign in the Segmentum Solar, Yarrick's last words were simple. The greenskins believe I cannot die. Let them keep believing. Somewhere, perhaps on another Armageddon yet to come, that belief still burns. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, belief is reality. And as long as the orcs believe in Yarrick, he fights on. I do not fight for victory. I fight because I must. Because someone must. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick, M41-759. Faith is not belief without proof. It is belief without the need of it. Saint Celestine, recorded sermon, M41-997. In the endless night of the 41st millennium, where faith and death are the twin currencies of survival, there are few names spoken with such awe, such reverence, and such fear as Saint Celestine. To some, she is the Emperor's angel, the living saint, chosen vessel of divine will. By far, she is a heresy in flesh, proof that the line between miracle and madness no longer exists. But to those who have seen her, truly seen her, descending upon wings of golden light, she is something beyond words. She is hope incarnate. No one remembers where Celestine was born. Her records are fragmented, scattered across the millennia of war and corruption. What is known is that she once served as a sister of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, a warrior among many, sworn to the ecclesiarchy and the Emperor's light. She was devout, disciplined, and utterly ordinary, until the day she died. It was on the scorched plains of the world of Sanctus Lyce, during one of the countless crusades that define humanity's eternal war against itself. Her squad was surrounded. Orcs, heretics, traitors. It hardly matters. The enemy was everywhere. Celestine fought until her armor broke and her blood drenched the soil. She fell, whispering a final prayer to the God Emperor. Her body was left to burn, but death did not claim her. Instead, it transformed her. When the flames died down, the survivors swore they saw a light, blinding, pure, and impossibly bright, rise from the ashes. From that fire, Celestine stood once more, her wounds gone, her armor shining like sunlight made solid. In her hands burned the sword, ardent blade, and upon her shoulders unfurled wings of radiant gold. That day, a soldier cried, "A saint walks among us." And so the name spread, Saint Celestine, the living miracle. From that moment onward, wherever Celestine walked, death faltered. She led armies across the galaxy, appearing when all seemed lost, on worlds swallowed by chaos, on cities devoured by tyrannids, on tomb planets where Necrons stirred from slumber. And each time, her presence turned despair into fire. Men who had lost all faith found themselves rising again, shouting her name. Even the faithless wept when they saw her, because she embodied what the Imperium had long forgotten, the Emperor's mercy. To see Celestine in battle is to witness both grace and wrath made flesh. She descends from the heavens with her Gemini superior, her twin bodyguards, her eternal companions, both as radiant and terrible as she. Where her blade passes, demons burn to ash. Where her gaze falls, the broken stand. It is said that her footsteps leave trails of light that linger even after she is gone, as though the ground itself remembers her holiness. Friends, and yet, for all her divinity, Celestine is not infallible. She doubts, she questions, she weeps. There are moments recorded, rare, hidden by the ecclesiarchy, where she kneels alone before the stars, whispering, "Why me? Why was I chosen when so many greater than I are gone?" Because, unlike the Primarchs or the demigods of old, Celestine is mortal. Her body can bleed, her heart can break. She has died many times, slain by daemons, torn apart by bolter fire, crushed beneath the engines of war. But every time she falls, she rises again. No one knows how. Some say the Emperor himself resurrects her. Others claim her faith alone bends reality, that she wills herself back to life through sheer belief. And some whisper darker things, that she is not resurrected, but rebuilt, again and again, by the will of the warp itself, upon a forces she cannot comprehend. The ecclesiarchy forbids such talk, of course. To question a saint is to question the Emperor's own design. But Celestine herself never claims certainty. When asked if she is divine, she always answers the same way. Block quote, I am his servant, no more, no less. The miracle of Saint Celestine is not her wings, nor her sword, nor her immortality. It is that she still chooses to believe. In a galaxy where belief is a weapon and doubt a death sentence, she believes not because she must, but because she wants to. Because she has seen the abyss, and still she chooses light. On the battlefields of Cadia, Celestine's legend was sealed. Bree, as the forces of Abaddon the Despoiler unleashed the 13th Black Crusade, tearing open the galaxy itself, she appeared amid the chaos, radiant and terrible, leading the remnants of the Imperial Guard and the Adepta Sororitas. When the planet's crust began to split under the raw pressure of the warp, she stood atop the walls of Kasser Kraf and lifted her sword toward the heavens. Witnesses say her wings ignited with such brilliance that demons fled screaming. For a brief moment, it was as if the Emperor himself looked through her eyes. She could not save Cadia. No one could. But she gave its defenders something greater than survival. A good death. And in Warhammer 40,000, a good death is the rarest miracle of all. When Cadia finally broke, when the Eye of Terror tore open and the Great Rift divided the galaxy, Celestine did not fall into despair. She gathered the survivors, Imperial Guard, sisters, refugees, even outcasts, and led them across the stars in what became known as the March of Light. Through warp storms, through betrayal and ruin, she guided them toward the resurrected Primarch, Roboute Guilliman, bearing a single message: the Emperor protects. His work is not done. Simply put, it was she who stood beside Guilliman when he returned to Terra. Her presence bridging faith and reason, divine will and human resolve. In that moment, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Imperium saw both its halves united, the logic of the statesman and the fire of the Sate. Yet, Celestine's story is not one of triumph. It is one of sacrifice, again and again. Every time she rises, she pays a price. Every time she breathes, something within her fades. Each resurrection takes her further from humanity, closer to something ineffable and sorrowful. Those who have seen her eyes up close describe them as infinite, simply but with weariness. A weariness of one who has carried too many souls upon her wings. Some scholars within the Ordo Hereticus speculate that Celestine's immortality is tied to the souls of the faithful who die around her, that their devotion sustains her form. If true, she carries the spirits of billions within her, a living reliquary of humanity's undying faith. And perhaps that is the secret of her endurance, not the Emperor's hand, nor divine magic, but collective belief, the shared yearning of mortals to see something pure in a galaxy that has forgotten what purity means. Celestine is not merely one woman. She is what humanity wishes it could be. On countless worlds, statues of her rise beside cathedrals. Priests chant her name as part of the imperial creed. But for all her sanctity, Celestine never stays long. She appears, fights, dies, rises, then vanishes. Always moving, always searching, as if she herself does not believe she belongs anywhere. There are whispers that she sometimes appears in dreams, to soldiers on the brink of death, to pilgrims lost in warp storms, to children praying in darkness. In those visions, she does not speak. She only extends her hand, and light follows. When they awaken, they find themselves alive. Miracle or myth, no one can say. But in a universe where even hope is a weapon, Celestine is the Emperor's most merciful blade, and yet her mercy is terrible. She has burned traitors alive with a single gesture. She has cut down those who claimed to love her, but whose faith wavered. Her compassion is pure, and purity in this galaxy kills as surely as any bolter. Saint Celestine embodies the paradox of faith itself. To heal, she must burn. To save, she must destroy. To live, she must die. And through it all, she never ceases to pray. There is one tale rarely told outside the halls of the convent sanctorum. After the siege of Cadia, when the survivors reached the shrine world of Ophelia VII, Celestine knelt before the statue of the Emperor, a monument taller than mountains, and remained there for 3 days without moving. When she rose, witnesses say her wings dimmed. She turned to the high priest and said only this: "He weeps for us still." No one knows what she meant. Perhaps even she does not. But the idea that the Emperor, entombed, silent, and godlike, could still feel sorrow is almost blasphemous. And yet, if anyone could know such a thing, it would be her. In many ways, Celestine is not simply the Emperor's messenger. She is his memory. She remembers what humanity was before it became a machine of war. She remembers mercy, beauty, and love, things long exiled from imperial life. And perhaps that memory, more than any sword or miracle, is what keeps her alive. When people see Celestine, They are reminded that the Imperium was once built not only on conquest, but on hope. That faith is not just obedience, it is trust. That miracles are not rewards, they are burdens. The greatest tragedy of Saint Celestine is that she can never rest. Her duty is endless. Every time she dies, she is reborn into another war, another world, another ocean of suffering. And still she fights, because someone must. If she ever stopped, if she ever laid down her sword, perhaps the light itself would fade from the galaxy. On the day of her final death, if such a thing can ever come, it is said that the skies will open, and a golden star will fall upon Terra. The faithful call it prophecy. The cynics call it poetry. But those who know her best simply say this: when Celestine's wings finally close, the Emperor will open his eyes. Whether that day comes in 10 years or 10,000, one truth remains. Saint Celestine is not just a hero. She is the answer to despair. When all else crumbles, when even angels fall, she rises, again and again, carrying humanity's last breath of hope upon her radiant wings. And somewhere in that endless fire, in the heart of her faith, burns the quietest of prayers. Block quote, "Forgive us, my Lord. We are trying." Block quote, Part 2. There is no miracle in rising from death. The miracle is choosing to return. Saint Celestine to Roboute Guilliman, N42.01. History remembers the kings and the conquerors. It forgets the ones who built their thrones. Malcador the Sigillite. Before there were gods, there were men. Before there were Primarchs, there was the Emperor. And before there was the Imperium, there was Malcador the Sigillite, the first and last friend of the Master of Mankind. He wielded no sword, led no legions, yet without him there would be no Imperium of man. He was the whisper behind the throne, the mind behind the mask, the one who carried the Emperor's dream when even gods faltered. To understand Malcador is to understand the burden of knowing too much, and the tragedy of serving greatness that cannot be saved. Long before the Great Crusade, long before the Primarchs walked among the stars, there was a shadowed age when the Emperor was merely a man wandering Terra, uniting tribes, manipulating empires, shaping the future in silence. Somewhere in that endless march of centuries, he met Malcador. No one knows where or how. Legends say Malcador was already ancient, a psyker of immense power, a scholar whose knowledge stretched back to the dark age of technology. Others claim he was human once, made immortal through the Emperor's science. Whatever the truth, by the time the Imperium rose, Malcador was always there. He is described as an old man, frail, cloaked in gray, bearing the staff of office and the sigil of the administratum. But behind that fragile shell burned one of the sharpest minds to ever live. When the Emperor forged his armies, Malcador built his institutions. When the Emperor created the Primarchs, Malcador created the Administratum, the Inquisition, and the strong Grey Knights, the hidden weapons of the Imperium that would survive even after gods were gone. He was the architect of the Imperium's soul, even as he stood in its shadow. Malcador's power was not in battle, but in understanding. He could see the pattern in chaos, the flaw in perfection. He knew that the Emperor's dream of a secular, enlightened humanity was doomed. Not because it was wrong, but because humanity itself could not sustain it. People needed gods. They needed faith. and faith always devours truth. Malcador once said, "The Emperor believes he can free mankind from superstition. I believe superstition is the price of being human." That quiet argument, unspoken but eternal, defined their friendship. The Emperor sought unity through reason. Malcador sought survival through compromise. Together, they formed the perfect whole. One light, one shadow. Without one, the other could not endure. During the Great Crusade, while the Emperor's legions conquered the stars, Malcador stayed behind on Terra, weaving a web of bureaucracy, spies, and laws that would keep the Imperium running long after the warriors were gone. He founded the Council of Terra, trained the Sigillite Order, and acted as regent in the Emperor's absence. But even then, he saw the storm coming, the seeds of rebellion, the pride of the Primarchs, the arrogance of demigods who believed they understood their creator. When the first whispers of Horus's betrayal reached Terra, Malcador was not surprised. He had known it was inevitable. He had simply hoped it would not come so soon. When the Horus heresy began, Malcador's role became something darker, the keeper of secrets, the destroyer of truth. He commanded the Officio Assassinorum, sanctioned the killings of imperial governors, and erased entire records from history. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. The Imperium could not survive the truth of its own fragility. Someone had to carry the sins that even the Emperor would not bear. There are documents, hidden in the sealed archives of the Inquisition, that describe the night the Emperor confided in him, the night before the siege of Terra. The Emperor spoke of inevitability. He knew he would fall. He knew Horus would betray him. He knew humanity would turn him into a god. He hated it, but he could not stop it. And so he asked Malcador to do what he could not, to preserve the dream, even when the dreamer was gone. Malcador listened, bowed his head, and said simply, "Then I will be the liar who saves the truth." When the traitor legions reached Terra, the galaxy burned, the palace trembled, billions died, even gods bled. And in those final hours, when the Emperor ascended to the Golden Throne to wage his psychic war against the warp, Malcador performed his greatest act of sacrifice. He took the throne in the Emperor's place, to hold the line for one single day. Just one. No mortal could survive the psychic conflagration of that machine, a gateway to the Imperium itself. It burned souls like parchment, but Malcador sat upon it willingly, smiling faintly, and whispered, "You have work to do, my friend. Go. I will keep the fire." Remember, he endured for hours, channeling energies that could destroy stars. He held back demons, kept the webway from consuming Terra, and bought the Emperor the time he needed to confront Horus. His flesh turned to dust. His bones crumbled to ash. But his soul, oh, his soul burned bright, brighter than any Primarch's, until the end. When the Emperor returned, broken and dying, he found only silence where his oldest friend had been. The throne was empty, save for a faint trace of warmth upon the seat. Malcador was gone, consumed utterly. The Mechanicus claim that fragments of his psychic essence still linger within the Golden Throne, woven into its circuits like a ghost. Some tech priests even whisper that when the throne malfunctions, they can hear a voice, dry, patient, weary, muttering instructions. They call it the Administrator. The Inquisition knows better. They call it the Ademinator. Sigillite, comma. If true, then Malcador still serves. Even in death he remains the Emperor's shadow, tending to a machine that sustains his endless torment. In the centuries that followed, Malcador became myth, the first lord of the Imperium, the regent of Terra, the empire of the Inquisition. His symbol, the sigil of the quill and flame, became the mark of authority itself. But his true legacy is invisible. Threads of influence that shape the Imperium even now. He founded the strong Grey Knights, warriors forged from psychic purity, designed to fight daemons without corruption. He established the strong Inquisition, a secret empire of truth-seekers tasked with preserving humanity at any cost. He created the strong Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the Administratum, and the strong Schola Progenium, the institutions that define imperial life. He built everything the Emperor dreamed of, and everything the Emperor would have despised. Because Malcador understood what his master could not, that truth cannot rule men, only belief can. Some scholars of the Ordo Xenos claim that Malcador foresaw the long night, the 10,000 years of stagnation that would follow, that he saw the rise of the ecclesiarchy, the cults, the tyranny of faith, and accepted it all. Not because he wanted it, but because it was the only way humanity would survive. To them, he is the great compromiser, the one who traded enlightenment for endurance. To others, he is a saint, the purest servant of the Emperor's vision. And to a few heretical philosophers, he is the architect of the Imperium's damnation, the man who built a prison and called it salvation. Perhaps he is all three. In the annals of forbidden history, there exists one final letter, supposedly written by Malcador to the Emperor in the last hours before his death. It is written in a calm, steady hand, with no fear or regret. It reads, "My lord, I have done all you asked of me. The world you sought to create will endure, though not as you intended. The truth will wither, but the idea will live. Humanity will forget your words, but remember your name, and that will be enough. Forgive me, for I will teach them to worship you. It is the only way they will listen. Bree, when you awaken, if you ever do, hate me for what I have done, but know that I did it for them. For us, Malcador. If it is real, then Malcador was not simply the Emperor's servant. He was his betrayer and his savior. In a galaxy filled with warriors who fought and died for glory, Malcador's heroism is quiet. He fought no great battles. He commanded no armies. He saved humanity with a pen, with a word, with a choice. He is the embodiment of a truth few dare to speak, that sometimes, to preserve the light, one must learn to live in darkness. He was the Emperor's shadow, not because he followed, but because he understood. Light cannot exist without shadow. Hope cannot exist without sacrifice. And so, when the final histories of the Imperium are written, when the fires of war burn out and silence reigns over Terra, perhaps one line will remain. He stood beside a god and did not kneel. They say that, when Malcador died, the Emperor wept, not for himself, not for mankind, but for the friend who chose to carry his sins. In that single act, sitting upon the golden throne, burning away his soul to keep the dream alive, Malcador became more than mortal. He became the measure of loyalty itself. Not the loyalty of obedience, but of understanding. The loyalty that demands sacrifice, not worship. The loyalty that asks for nothing and gives everything. It is said that when the Emperor's spirit flickers, When his will weakens, he feels a whisper, calm, familiar, eternal, speaking through the machine's hum. Rest, old friend. I am still here. Check your emotions. Maybe it's only static, or maybe somewhere in that endless machinery of light and pain, the two oldest souls in human history still keep watch, one blazing like a dying sun, the other burning quietly beside it. The Emperor endures, and the Sigillite, his shadow, endures with him. Higher, to rule is to lie, to save is to sin. If I must be damned for mankind's sake, then damn me gladly. Words, Malcador the Sigillite, Final Testament. I do not fight because I believe I can win. I fight because I cannot stand to see humanity lose. Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines. He is called many things: the Avenging Sun, the Lord of Macragge, the Architect of the Imperium Secundus. To some, he is the Emperor's greatest creation. To others, he is a relic, a ghost of a rational age long since drowned beneath the tide of faith. Yet even after 10,000 years of nightmare, Roboute Guilliman remains humanity's last strategist, the only demigod still trying to save a species that no longer remembers how to think. When the Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy by the ruin storm, Guilliman's pod fell upon the world of Macragge, a civilized planet that had never fully collapsed after the Age of Strife. It was a world of order, discipline, and ambition, perfectly suited to the son who would embody all those virtues. Konar, the ruler of Macragge's eastern continent, the young Roboute showed brilliance from his earliest years. By the age of 10, he could quote ancient Terran law, out-debate the elder governors, and lead armies in the planet's endless border wars. When the Emperor finally found him, the two met not as god and child, but as equals. For a moment, the Emperor saw in Guilliman something he had long lost in his other sons: clarity, reason. A mind that sought not domination, but stability. And so Guilliman was given command of the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, and unleashed upon the stars. Under his guidance, the 13th Legion became more than soldiers. They became administrators, engineers, teachers. Guilliman's conquests did not end in ruin. They ended in civilizations. Where his brothers razed, he rebuilt. Where others imposed tyranny, he imposed law. He created the realm of Ultramar, a cluster of 500 worlds united not by fear, but by governance. Each planet contributed, each was protected. It was the closest thing the Imperium ever had to paradise. For Guilliman, war was not an end, but a means. A necessary evil to secure the foundation for peace. He believed the Emperor's dream could become more than myth. He believed mankind could rise again through discipline and logic. But logic cannot survive in the face of chaos. When the Horus heresy erupted, Guilliman was far from Terra. By the time his fleets reached the Sol system, the Emperor lay broken upon the Golden Throne, and half his brothers were dead or damned. The dream was over. In the ashes of that apocalypse, Guilliman faced a choice: let the Imperium collapse or build something new from its corpse. He chose the latter. He became the Imperium's architect once more, not of glory, but of survival. It was Guilliman who wrote the strong Codex Astartes, the sacred text that reshaped the Space Marines. He broke the legions into smaller chapters to prevent any single commander from threatening mankind again. Many of his surviving brothers despised him for it. Rogal Dorn raged that he was destroying their legacy. The Space Wolves accused him of cowardice, but Guilliman endured their hatred because he understood the lesson the Emperor had not. No empire can survive if it relies upon gods. It must be built to endure men. Centuries later, in the twilight years of the 41st millennium, Guilliman slept, his body entombed in stasis after a mortal wound inflicted by Fulgrim, his traitorous brother. For 10,000 years he lay silent, a statue frozen in time while the Imperium rotted around him. When he awoke, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The age of Dark Imperium had begun. Half the galaxy was swallowed by the warp. The Emperor was worshipped as a god, and reason, his father's dream, was gone. Guilliman's resurrection was not divine. It was technological, engineered by the Archmagos Call, using the power of the Eldar's god of death. When Guilliman opened his eyes, he saw the Imperium not as a marvel, but as a ruin. The bureaucracy he had built had become a cancer. The faith he once tolerated had become madness. Everywhere he turned, he found superstition, corruption, and the hollow echo of his father's ideals. And yet, even in despair, he acted. He rallied the loyal chapters, launched the Indomitus Crusade, and reconquered worlds lost to chaos. He rebuilt the Astronomicon, re-established communication across the rift, and saved more lives in a decade than most heroes save in eternity. But though his armies marched beneath banners of victory, his heart was heavy. For every world he liberated, he saw the same truth, that humanity no longer fought for survival, but for belief. The Emperor's dream had become a prison of worship on the bridge of his flagship. "In Macrag's honor," Guilliman once said, "they kneel to him as a god, though he forbade it. They burn in his name, though he taught reason. And yet I dare not stop them, because faith, not logic, now keeps the stars alight." That is Guilliman's curse, to be a rational man trapped in an irrational age, to fight for an empire that venerates ignorance as holiness, to serve a father who can no longer answer him. Private, Guilliman prays, not because he believes the Emperor listens, but because it comforts those who still need to believe. He stands in cathedrals built in his father's image and wonders whether the god those billions worship is even the same being who once walked beside him. Sometimes he whispers to the throne itself, "Father, what have they done to your dream?" There is, of course, no answer, only the hum of the machines, the smell of incense, and the faint pulse of psychic agony that radiates from the Emperor's broken body. Guilliman leads on. He has become the Lord Commander of the Imperium, supreme among men, yet he finds little pride in it. To his captains, he is a general. To the ecclesiarchy, a living saint. To the mechanicus, a specimen. To himself, he is simply a caretaker, the last adult in a galaxy of children playing with apocalypse. He fights, not because he loves the Imperium, but because he cannot abandon humanity to its fate. He builds, he commands, he bleeds, knowing every victory only postpones the inevitable. The galaxy will burn again. Chaos will rise again. And still he fights, because someone must. There are moments when Guilliman's stoicism cracks, brief flashes of the man beneath the armor. He visits Macragge and walks among the citizens who call him divine. He listens to their hymns, their prayers, their blind devotion, and feels both. Pride and horror. When he kneels in the shrine of his mother, Tarasha Euphrates, he murmurs, would she know me now? Would she call this empire my success or my failure? No one answers. The silence is its own judgment. Yet Guilliman is not without hope. Hope, for him, is not naive optimism. It is discipline. It is the relentless belief that even in the face of entropy, structure matters. He trains new generations of Primaris Marines, a new breed of warriors stronger, faster, more disciplined than any before. He teaches them not to worship him, but to think, to plan, to serve mankind instead of myth. In his councils, he surrounds himself with mortals, advisors, scribes, and diplomats, because he remembers what his brothers forgot. Humanity is not just a species to be protected. It is the purpose of their creation. To his warriors, he says, block quote, "We are not gods. Our tools must be used wisely." The tragedy of Guilliman is that he is both the Imperium's savior and its prisoner. He cannot destroy the ecclesiarchy without collapsing the empire. He cannot end the wars without feeding the enemies at the gate. He cannot change the faith that sustains the people, because in the grim darkness of the far future, belief has replaced truth. And so he compromises. He leads crusades under banners of holy zeal, knowing full well that zeal is poison. He commands priests to bless his campaigns, though he finds their prayers absurd. He smiles in public and despairs in private. The avenging son has become the emperor's regent, a rational mind steering a mad god's throne. Yet even within his sorrow, there is greatness. When others see futility, Guilliman sees duty. He knows that the light of the Imperium, no matter how flickering, still illuminates the void. And if that light dies, mankind will vanish forever. That cannot happen, not while he still breathes. In one of his rare speeches to the High Lords of Terra, he said, "You mistake survival for victory. But survival is victory enough. For 10,000 years we have endured, and endurance is the truest form of triumph." That sentence, simple and cold, became a new creed among his followers. In a galaxy obsessed with glory, Guilliman preaches endurance. In a universe of blind faith, he teaches discipline. He is not a prophet of salvation. He is the prophet of perseverance. There are some who believe Guilliman will one day face his father again, that the Emperor will awaken, and judgment will come. They imagine a glorious reunion of God and Son. But those who know Guilliman understand the truth. If that day ever comes, it will not be a reunion. It will be an argument. He will stand before the golden throne and ask, as he has always asked, was it worth it? The lies, the wars, the empire of corpses, was this your dream? And perhaps, in that silent chamber of dying light, the Emperor will finally answer. Or perhaps, there will only be silence again. For now, Guilliman carries on. He commands fleets across the divided galaxy. He watches worlds rise and fall. He mourns every soldier lost, every planet consumed. But his resolve never breaks. He is the avenging son, not because he avenges the Emperor, but because he avenges humanity's potential. He is the last embodiment of a dream that refuses to die. And though he will never say it aloud, deep within the steel walls of his flagship, he still whispers his father's creed. The Imperium is not a god. It is a promise. So, long as he lives, that promise endures. For, I am tired of gods and angels. Give me men of duty, and I will build you a future. Of Roboute, Guilliman, 42.007. Pain is weakness leaving the soul. Duty is the soul itself. Primarch Rogal Dorn. In a galaxy of warriors, dreamers, and gods, there is one name spoken not with awe or fear, but with quiet respect, the kind reserved for those who never wavered. He was not the Emperor's most brilliant son, nor the most beloved, nor even the most victorious. He was something rarer. He was dependable. He was the wall upon which the galaxy broke. His name was Strong Rogal Dorn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, the Unyielding, the Stone Sentinel, the Master of the Eternal Fortress. If Sanguinius was beauty, if Horus was charisma, and Guilliman was intellect, then Dorn was foundation. He was not meant to inspire love, but trust. The kind of trust that holds when the universe itself collapses. Rogal Dorn was discovered upon the frozen world of Inwit, a harsh and unrelenting planet orbiting a dying sun. The people there lived within vast ice citadels, surviving by strength, endurance, and ruthless discipline. From them, Dorn learned his creed, that comfort is decay and survival is victory. When the Emperor found him, Dorn did not kneel. He saluted, a soldier recognizing a commander. The Emperor smiled, for he saw in Dorn not just obedience, but a reflection of his own resolve. In that moment, two wills aligned, unbending, absolute. Given command of the Imperial Fists, Dorn became the Emperor's personal champion. Where others brought fire, he brought stone. He built fortresses, cities, bastions, monuments of defense that could stand for 10,000 years. He was the keeper of humanity's walls, both literal and symbolic. The Emperor often said of him, "I would trust only Dorn to build it." And Dorn, in return, lived for that trust. He did not seek love nor praise, only to serve. During the Great Crusade, while his brothers raced to conquer, Dorn took the long, hard path, the sieges, the defenses, the attritional wars, where victory was measured not in banners raised, but in the survival of a single outpost. He was patient, he was tireless, and above all, he was loyal. When others grew restless, Dorn never questioned the Emperor's purpose. To him, faith was not emotional, it was structural. Like the stones of a fortress, you build upon it. You never question whether the foundation is real. You simply ensure it does not crack. This was this unwavering nature that would later define both his greatness and his tragedy. When the Horus heresy began, Dorn was the first to believe. Where others doubted the Emperor's warnings, Dorn acted. He fortified Terra, prepared the defenses of the Imperial Palace, and swore that no traitor would take a single step unpunished. Briefly, it was he who built the walls that would hold against the greatest siege in human history. The siege of Terra is remembered in 1,000 songs and 10,000 prayers, but few understand what it cost. While Sanguinius and the Blood Angels bled in the sky, while the Imperial Fists manned the walls, Dorn stood at the heart of the storm. Every hour, every breath, every decision, the burden of the entire Imperium rested upon him. When the traitor legions bombarded the palace, Dorn walked the battlements, silent, hands behind his back, giving orders with the calm of inevitability. He watched as his sons died by the thousands. He never flinched, not once. Those who fought beside him said his presence was a weapon, that even in despair, they found courage simply by seeing him stand. To Dorn, the battle was not about victory. It was about denial. Every second he held the wall was one more second for the Emperor to reach Horus. Every soldier who died bought humanity one heartbeat more. He understood, better than anyone, that the measure of a man is not how he wins, but how long he can stand before falling. When the Emperor struck down Horus and was mortally wounded, Dorn was the one who carried his broken body back to the Golden Throne. It was Dorn's arms that bore the lifeless form of the man he had served his entire life. It was Dorn's voice that first broke the silence of victory. The master of mankind is dead. Long live his dream. In that moment, the indomitable wall cracked, not in stone, but in soul. The aftermath of the heresy was perhaps even crueler than the war itself. The Imperium was shattered. The Primarchs turned on one another, arguing over how to rebuild what had been lost. Guilliman sought order. The others sought vengeance. And Dorn, who had lost more than any of them, sought penance. He blamed himself for the Emperor's fate. For every wall that fell, for every son who died defending it. He became obsessed with perfection, rebuilding, fortifying, punishing himself and his legion for every perceived flaw. When Guilliman presented the Codex Astartes, dividing the legions into smaller chapters, Dorn resisted. He saw it as betrayal, a dismantling of the brotherhood he had built. The two Primarchs came to blows, and for a moment Dorn's rage eclipsed even his discipline. But in the end he yielded, not because he agreed, but because he realized that unity demanded sacrifice. He split the Imperial fists, scattering his sons across the stars, and withdrew into silence. Even in grief, he obeyed duty. In the centuries that followed, Dorn became more and more like the fortresses he built, unyielding but hollow. He spoke little, smiled never. He trained new generations of space marines with merciless precision, molding them not into heroes, but bulwarks. They would never break, because he would never allow it. Yet even the strongest wall can crumble from within. During the Iron Cage, a brutal war against the renegade Iron Warriors led by his bitter rival Perturabo, Dorn sought redemption in pain. He ordered his chapter to assault a fortress built as a trap, a labyrinth of death designed to humiliate and destroy him. For weeks they fought, dying by the thousands, but Dorn refused to retreat. Every wall that fell, he rebuilt. Every failure he answered with blood. When Guilliman finally intervened to pull him out, Dorn's armor was shattered, his face torn, his body barely alive. But his eyes still burned with that same impossible fire. "We held," he said simply, standing amid ruins. He had turned Perturabo's mockery into a monument of defiance. The Iron Cage broke the Imperial fists and remade them. From that day onward, the fists swore an oath before every battle. "We stand, we endure, we are the wall." M-Pod, R.H. Dorn's final fate remains one of the great mysteries of the 41st millennium. During a desperate boarding action against a Chaos fleet, he led from the front, as always. He was last seen fighting within the corridors of the Despoiler-class battleship, Sword of Sacrilege. When the ship was destroyed, only fragments of his armor were recovered, and one hand still gripping a weapon. To this day, that hand rests in the phalanx, the eternal fortress of the Imperial fists, sealed in a shrine of gold and silence. They call it the Hand of Dorn. His sons do not weep before it. They salute, for they know their father would accept nothing less. To them, he is not gone. He is the fortress itself, the spirit of every wall that holds, every soldier who refuses to yield. Rogal Dorn's greatness does not lie in charisma or glory or triumph. Bracket, endurance, in the refusal to bend, even when breaking would be easier. In the understanding that true strength is not victory, but continuance. He never sought to be remembered. He sought only to be useful. He never asked for love. He asked only for obedience, not from arrogance, but from necessity. He was the Imperium's spine, the Emperor's will made stone. In the end, it is perhaps fitting that his last known words were not a battle cry, but a question. Did I do enough? There was no answer, of course. There never is. But every fortress that stands, every world that endures, every guardsman who holds his ground against impossible odds, they all answer him in silence. Yes, you did. Rogal Dorn represents the virtue most forgotten in the 41st millennium, steadfastness. When saints rise and fall, when demigods betray and legends crumble, his example remains, a man who stood, not for glory, but for duty. He teaches that courage is not loud. It is quiet. It is the sound of boots that do not retreat, of hearts that do not yield, of hands that keep building even after everything has fallen. He is the wall between humanity and oblivion. He always was. He always will be. And if someday the Emperor awakens and looks across the ashes of his Imperium, he will find one thing still standing, the legacy of Rogal Dorn, the fortress that never fell. The walls of Terra were not stone, they were men, and their name was Dorn. Imperial Archive, Siege of Terra, M31.014. Protect is the greatest act of creation. To destroy without compassion is to betray the Emperor's light. Vulkan, Primarch of the Salamanders. There are Primarchs remembered for conquest, for brilliance, for faith, or for terror. And then there is Vulkan, who is remembered for kindness, a word that, in the 41st millennium, has almost no meaning left. In a universe that devours mercy, where survival demands cruelty and victory demands faithless slaughter, Vulkan stands apart. He is not a god of war, nor a saint of vengeance. He is the man who refused to stop caring. The Emperor forged 20 sons, each to embody a fragment of his own perfection. Some inherited his will, some his fury, but only one inherited his heart. When the Primarchs were cast across the stars, Vulkan's pod fell upon the volcanic death world of Nocturne, a planet of fire and beasts, where the ground itself shifted with every eruption and the skies burned red with ash. The people of Nocturne were simple miners and smiths, struggling to survive in the shadow of endless destruction. When they found the child, they did not see a god. They saw a boy, strong, strange, but theirs. Vulkan grew among them, not as a conqueror, but as a protector. He hunted the great salamanders that roamed the molten plains, fought beasts that could swallow tanks, and built tools and weapons from the heart of volcanoes. He was not worshipped, he was loved. When the Emperor arrived on Nocturne, he came not with armies, but in disguise. He challenged Vulkan to a contest, to see who could slay the greatest beast and return alive. They both succeeded. When Vulkan returned carrying the carcass of the monstrous salamander, He found the Emperor waiting with an even greater feat. He had saved the people from a collapsing mountain. Seeing that the stranger had risked his life for mortals, Vulkan recognized him immediately. He knelt, not out of submission, but respect, and the Emperor smiled. "Rise, my son," he said. "You are what I hoped you would be." Given command of the 18th Legion, the Salamanders, Vulkan shaped them in his image, patient, compassionate, relentless in defense of the weak. Where other legions saw mortals as expendable, the Salamanders saw them as sacred. They stayed behind to rebuild after victory, shared their food with refugees, and crafted wonders for the common people. They did not fight for glory. They fought for lives. In a galaxy ruled by fear, the Salamanders became the rarest thing of all, loved by those they protected. Vulkan taught his sons that to be strong was meaningless if one could not use that strength to protect. "A sword that kills the helpless," he said, "is no weapon of man. It is a beast's fang." To his legion, he was not only their Primarch, but their father. He knew each by name, remembered their deeds, and mourned their deaths. He built their weapons by hand, forging each blade with care and love. His forge was both temple and tomb, a place where creation and remembrance were one. He told them often, "We are fire, but fire warms as well as burns. Never forget which you are." Vulkan's compassion was his strength and his curse. When the Horus heresy began, he could not believe his brothers would betray their father. Even when the dropships of betrayal rained fire upon Istvan V, even as the loyal legions were butchered by those they trusted, Vulkan refused to give up on his kin. He fought not out of hatred, but sorrow. He led the Salamanders in the doomed defense of Istvan, where treachery turned paradise to hell. For days he battled against impossible odds, his hammer Dawnbringer striking with the fury of 10 suns. He fought Ferrus Manus's killers, faced down Fulgrim's serpentine madness, and bled until even his superhuman body failed. Captured by Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, Vulkan's nightmare truly began. Kurz sought to break him, to prove that even the noblest of the Emperor's sons could be corrupted. Tortured Vulkan endlessly, killing him again and again, mocking his faith, his love, his mercy. But Vulkan was a perpetual, a being who could not die. Each time he burned, he rose again. Each time his flesh was flayed, it healed. Each time Kurz whispered hatred into his ear, he answered with silence. The torture went on for years. Vulkan's immortality became his torment and his weapon. No matter what Kurz did, he could not make him hate. He could not make him break. At last, in despair and fury, Kurz screamed, "Why won't you hate me?" And Vulkan answered, "Because someone must love you." Even Kurz, monster, murderer, fallen angel, was human once. And Vulkan refused to forget that. When Vulkan finally escaped, his mind was fractured. He wandered across the stars, haunted by visions, by echoes of Kurz's laughter. He was hunted by demons, by traitors, by memories of those he could not save. But even broken, he still protected. He rescued survivors, carried orphans from burning cities, rebuilt where others destroyed. There is an old tale, half legend, half truth, that he once crossed an entire war-torn planet, carrying a single child in his arms, through fire and ruin, without once setting her down. When asked why, He said, because her feet should never touch the ashes of this world. To the people, he was not a god. He was hope. In the aftermath of the heresy, Vulkan vanished. Some say he died at the siege of Terra. Others claim he sleeps beneath the volcanoes of Nocturne, awaiting the day his people call for him again. The salamanders believe he left behind 9 relics, scattered across the galaxy, each one forged by his hand, each one carrying a fragment of his soul. They search for them still, believing that when all 9 are found, Vulkan will return. Whether myth or prophecy, the truth is that Vulkan never truly left. He lives in every act of mercy that defies despair. He lives in every craftsman who builds when others destroy. He lives in every soldier who chooses to protect instead of conquer. Because Vulkan's immortality is not in flesh, it is in compassion. Among the Primarchs, he was perhaps the most human. He laughed. He wept. He celebrated life in a universe obsessed with death. And that is why the galaxy broke him more than any other. To care, in a world like Warhammer 40,000, is an act of rebellion. To show mercy is heresy. To forgive is impossible. But Vulkan did all 3. He once said to his sons, "We are not gods, we are guardians, and guardians do not rule, they serve." Those words became the Salamanders' eternal creed. To this day, they follow it. When they march to war, they bring fire, but not blind destruction. They save those they can. They rebuild what is lost. They fight as artisans, as shepherds, as men who still remember what the word good means. It is said that even the Emperor wept when he saw what Kurz had done to Vulkan. Perhaps because in Vulkan he saw what he had once been, a being who believed that humanity was worth saving, not because it was strong, but because it could be kind. Vulkan's legacy is not an empire, not a code, not a monument. It is a question. What does it mean to be human when humanity has forgotten itself? And that question echoes through the millennia. Every time a guardsman risks his life to save a comrade, every time a sister shields a child from fire, every time someone chooses mercy instead of hatred, that is Vulkan speaking through them. Some believe that one day, when the Emperor finally rises from the throne, Vulkan will be the first to greet him, not with triumph, not with worship, but with simple words. "Father, I kept them safe as long as I could," because that is who he is, the protector, the Forgemaster, the eternal flame that warms the coldest night. In a galaxy where even angels burn and heroes fall to madness, Vulkan remains the one light that never dims. He proves that strength without compassion is hollow, and that kindness in the end is the purest form of strength. The Salamanders still tell stories of him around their forges. They speak of the day he will return, not at the head of an army, but walking barefoot upon the ashes, smiling, saying, "I missed you, my sons." And when that day comes, it will not herald conquest, it will herald healing. Because Vulkan is not the god of fire, he is the god of the hearth. And even in the grim darkness of the far future, there must be warmth somewhere. Then end. In the end, it is not the wars we win that define us, but the lives we refuse to abandon. Vulkan. Recorded fragment, M31666. I saw my death, and I welcomed it. for in that moment, I would become what I was always meant to be. Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels. Among the Emperor's 20 sons, there was one who embodied everything mankind was meant to be: noble, beautiful, merciful, and doomed. He was called many names: the Angel, the brightest star, the last light before the fall. His name was Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, and his death would define the Imperium forever. When the Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy by the Ruin Storm, Sanguinius fell upon Baal Secundus, a world of radiation and ruin. Its skies were choked with ash, its surface littered with the bones of pre-imperial wars. The tribes that lived there were savage and starving, drinking poisoned water and fighting over dust. It was a place where beauty had long since died, and yet, when they found the infant in the sands, pale, winged, and radiant, they did not kill him. They bowed, for even in that wasteland, they recognized a miracle. As he grew, Sanguinius became their protector. He healed the sick, lifted the weak, and fought the mutant beasts that haunted their nights. His wings, those angelic symbols that would later become icons across the Imperium, were not mere ornaments. They were tools of salvation. He flew where others could not walk. He carried the dying to safety. He lifted the hopeless from despair. The people of Baal Secundus called him the Angel, and under his guidance, their world began to heal. For the first time in generations, they saw the sunrise without fear. When the Emperor finally came to Baal, he did not come as a conqueror. He came as a father, returning to a lost child. When he beheld Sanguinius, his expression softened, the way it never did with others. For Sanguinius reminded him of what humanity could have been, had it not drowned in blood and madness. The Emperor said only, block quote, "My son, I have found you. The galaxy awaits," blockbook, and Sanguinius bowed his head, smiling. Then let us bring light to its darkness. As commander of the X-Legion, Sanguinius transformed his blood angels from broken warriors into artists of war. He taught them not just to fight, but to aspire. Their blades struck with elegance, their armor gleamed with gold and crimson, their souls burned with passion. But to fight under Sanguinius was not merely to serve, it was to believe. He was not just their general, he was their hope. Under his wings, the X-Legion became a symbol of purity in a galaxy of corruption. Where others saw conquest, Sanguinius saw redemption. He built monuments to the worlds he saved. He wept for the enemies he was forced to kill. He was the Emperor's mercy made flesh. But mercy, in the Warhammer universe, is always punished. #end. From the moment he was born, Sanguinius was cursed with prophetic visions. He saw flashes of the future, moments of fire, betrayal, and death. He saw himself standing before the War Master Horus, his beloved brother, bathed in shadow. He saw his wings torn and blood pouring down the steps of the Imperial Palace. He knew, long before it happened, that his fate was sealed. Yet he never ran from it. He did not curse it. He accepted it. To see one's death is to be freed from fear, he told his sons. We are not defined by how we live, but by how we die. That was Sanguinius, radiant even in the face of oblivion. During the Great Crusade, his light touched every world he conquered. Even his brothers adored him. Guilliman called him the soul of the Imperium. Vulkan called him the purest of us all. Even Grim Dorn, who rarely spoke praise, once said, "If any of us deserve peace, it is he." From among all his brothers, there was one who loved him most, Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the favored son. They fought side by side, laughed together, dreamed together. Sanguinius believed in Horus more than anyone else, and when Horus fell to chaos, it broke Sanguinius's heart more deeply than any blade could. He did not hate Horus. He pitied him. He hoped, even then, that his brother could be saved. That hope would carry him all the way to his death. /S. When the Horus heresy began, Sanguinius was at the forefront of loyalty. He defended the Emperor's name, even as the galaxy turned against him. His blood angels fought with unmatched fury, red wings blazing across the stars. They bled for worlds that no longer believed, held the line when all others faltered. But even as he fought, Sanguinius could feel the corruption of chaos creeping into his sons. They began to change, their rage turning into bloodlust, their hunger for justice into madness. The flaw that would one day become known as the Red Thirst began to consume them. He could have denied it. He could have hidden it. Instead, he faced it head-on. He told his sons, "We are cursed, but a curse is not a chain. It is a choice, to fight what we are or to fall." And they followed him, because if their angel would not despair, neither would they. When the traitor fleets reached Terra, Sanguinius stood upon the walls of the Imperial Palace beside Dorn and the Emperor himself. He led the defense not with words, but with presence. Where he stood, men refused to retreat. When he took flight, the enemy faltered. It is said that demons recoiled from his light, that even chaos hesitated before his purity. During the siege, he fought for days without rest. His armor shattered, his wings torn, his blood turned to fire. But still, he fought. When the final gate fell, and Horus invited the Emperor to board his flagship for the final confrontation, Sanguinius followed. He knew what was coming. He had seen it all before. But he went anyway, not because he thought he could win, but because he knew the Emperor would need one last chance. On the bridge of the Vengeful Spirit, Sanguinius met Horus for the last time. The brother he loved, the War Master he trusted, now a god of ruin, his flesh a living storm of corruption. Horus offered him power, a chance to join him, to rule the galaxy as brothers once more. Sanguinius looked at him and wept. "I do not want to rule, my brother. I only want you back." Horus struck him down. It was said that the blow shattered his body, wings broken, bones crushed, but for a heartbeat, Sanguinius stood again. He faced Horus, not with a weapon, but with sorrow. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. For the first time, Horus hesitated. The man who had defied gods, who had slain his own brothers, faltered before Sanguinius's forgiveness. It was only a flicker, a heartbeat, but it was enough. Enough for the Emperor to arrive. Enough for the final battle to begin. Sanguinius died there, on the floor of the War Master's throne room, his blood staining the deck like a sacred sigil. And with his death, the Emperor saw what Horus had become, and struck him down. The Imperium was saved, but its angel was gone. When the Emperor was interred upon the golden throne, the surviving Primarchs wept. Guilliman mourned his wisdom, Dorn mourned his purity, but none mourned him more than his sons. The blood angels carry his death in their veins. The strong black rage, born of psychic trauma and guilt, still consumes them. Warriors reliving their fathers' final moments, seeing Horus before them in every enemy, fighting until they die. They call it a curse, but perhaps it is something else. Perhaps it is remembrance. Every time a blood angel takes flight, every time they charge into battle against impossible odds, they live that moment again. Sanguinius facing Horus, unbroken, unafraid. To the Imperium, Sanguinius became legend. His image adorns cathedrals. His name is whispered in prayers. He is the angel of humanity, the perfect son, the martyr of light. But those who truly understand his legacy know that his greatness was not his beauty, nor his wings, nor even his death. It was his choice. His choice was that he could have fled, he could have despaired, he could have hated, but he chose to love, even as it destroyed him. That is the essence of Sanguinius, not divine perfection, but human grace. Brother, he was proof that compassion can exist, even in a world designed to kill. And so, when his sons paint their armor red, it is not just for blood, it is for remembrance. They do not mourn him with tears. They honor him with every act of courage, every sacrifice, every refusal to give in to rage. Because in Sanguinius, humanity glimpsed what it could have been, and what it still might be if it remembers his lesson. They say that when the Emperor finally awakens, he will look upon the Imperium, a realm of darkness and zealotry, and he will weep. But perhaps, if he remembers his angel, he will smile. Because Sanguinius died believing that there was still light in mankind, however faint, and in a way, that light never went out. It burns in every act of heroism, every whisper of mercy, every soldier who stands against the dark and says, "Not today." That is Sanguinius's immortality. Not the blood of his sons, but the courage of his spirit. A courage born not of faith, but of love. If the Emperor was reason and Horus was ambition, then Sanguinius was the soul, and when he fell, something sacred left the galaxy. But even in death, he remains the one who proves that humanity's greatest weapon is not its armies, nor its gods, but its heart. And perhaps one day, when the stars burn out and the final battle comes, a single voice will rise above the roar of the warp, soft, sorrowful, and eternal, saying, "Do not be afraid. I am with you." And for one final moment, mankind will remember the light of its lost angel. Memorial inscription, Palace of Terra. I gave them everything. My body, my soul, my sons. And still they ask for more. Ending, the Emperor of mankind. Before there were gods, there was a man. Before there was the Imperium, there was a dream. And before there was darkness, there was light. The golden light of the Emperor of mankind, the greatest being ever born of humanity. He is the ruler of 1,000,000 worlds, the guardian of 10,000 years, and the prisoner of his own creation. Bree, his name is worshipped by trillions, yet few remember that he was once human. The Emperor's origin lies in myth and silence. Some say he was born on ancient Terra, thousands of years before the birth of Christ, from the collective souls of 1,000 immortal shamans, who sacrificed themselves to create a perfect guardian for humanity. Others whisper that he is older still, a being as old as mankind itself, walking through history under many names: Alexander, Merlin, Arthur, Christ, every legend of light, reborn through time. Whatever the truth, he was there, watching as humanity rose from the mud, built its first fires, and reached for the stars. He saw it all, the wars, the greed, the brilliance, the cruelty. And through it all, he never stopped believing in us. He did not love humanity because it was good. He loved it because it could be. In the dark age that followed the collapse of the first human empire, the age of strife, the galaxy fell into madness. Warp storms cut off the stars. Daemons devoured worlds. Psychers went insane. Civilization died screaming. And then upon the ruins of Terra, a man appeared. He was tall, radiant, calm, his eyes burning like the heart of the sun. He spoke of unity, of reason, of a galaxy free from superstition. His words gathered armies. His armies became legions, and his legions became gods. Thus began the Great Crusade, humanity's final march. Across the stars, the Emperor led from the front, not as a tyrant, but as a father. He did not ask for worship. He demanded only obedience and reason. "I am not your God," he told them. "I am your guide. Believe in yourselves, not in me." But humanity, as always, misunderstood. They needed gods. They needed faith. And they began to give it to him. Prayers whispered in the shadows. Temples raised in his name. And though he forbade it, their devotion grew. Because how could they not worship the one who burned brighter than the stars? To conquer the galaxy, he needed generals. So he made them. From his own gene-crafted essence, he forged 20 Primarchs, demigods, each embodying a fragment of his perfection. They were his sons, his warriors, his legacy. He loved them as only a creator can. And that love would become his downfall. When the dark gods of chaos scattered his sons across the galaxy, he wept, the only time he is ever said to have done so. He spent decades searching for them, one by one, finding them upon worlds of death and fire, raising them, shaping them, and for a time, it seemed, as though his dream might succeed. Humanity united. The stars burned with civilization once more, and the galaxy knelt before the light of Terra. But perfection, as always, cannot last. Among his sons was one who shone brighter than all the rest, Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the favored child. To him the Emperor entrusted the Great Crusade, while he returned to Terra to complete his most secret work. The Webway Project, a psychic gate that would allow humanity to travel safely through the warp, free from the demonic threat forever. It was to be the salvation of mankind, but Horus, poisoned by chaos, saw it as betrayal. He believed his father had abandoned him, and so began the Horus Heresy, the greatest civil war in the history of the galaxy. When the Emperor learned of his son's betrayal, he did not rage. He did not weep. He simply acted. He commanded his loyal sons to return to Terra, to defend the cradle of mankind. He knew what must come, that the dream was over, that the price would be everything. When Horus's armies arrived, the skies of Terra burned. The siege of Terra was not merely a war, it was the end of an age. Titans walked like gods across continents. Millions died every hour. The blood of demigods soaked the soil of the imperial palace. And through it all, the emperor stood upon his golden walls, silent, radiant, resolute. He was the calm in the storm. He gave no speeches. He asked for no prayers. He simply endured. When Sanguinius fell, his heart broke. When Dorn wept, he did not comfort him. He had no comfort left to give. He knew what awaited, the final confrontation. He boarded the vengeful spirit, alone, stepping into the heart of corruption itself. There, he faced his son, his greatest creation, consumed by chaos. Horus mocked him, pleading, raging, begging for recognition. He wanted his father's love, his approval, his acknowledgement of equality. And for a moment, the emperor hesitated. He saw not a monster, but the boy he had raised. That hesitation cost him everything. In that instant, Horus struck, not with a weapon, but with betrayal itself. The blow tore through the emperor's flesh and soul, nearly killing him. Yet even in agony, he did not hate. He still tried to save his son. Only when Horus turned to strike down an innocent, a lone imperial guardsman who had somehow survived the carnage, did the emperor finally act. He unleashed his full power. The gods of chaos screamed as he burned their champion to ash, erasing Horus from existence. The warp itself recoiled from his fury. But the victory came at a cost. The emperor's body was broken beyond repair. His soul burned like a dying star. Dorn found him lying beside the ashes of his son, whispering only one word, finished. Now he sits upon the golden throne, a living corpse, sustained by ancient machines and 1 billion daily sacrifices. 10,000 years have passed, and he has not spoken again. Yet even in death, he protects. His psychic will shields the Imperium from demons. His mind guides the Astronomicon, the light by which humanity still travels the stars. They call him the God Emperor now. They worship him with fanatic devotion. They kill in his name. They burn worlds for his glory. But this was never his wish. He dreamed of a galaxy of reason, and instead built an empire of faith. He wanted humanity to think, and they pray instead. He tried to destroy superstition, and became its greatest idol. The greatest irony in history is that the emperor succeeded too well, became what he feared most, a god. Some say he still lives, trapped within his body, watching everything he built decay. They say his mind still wanders the warp, fighting daemons in eternal silence. Others claim that he is dead, and only his echo remains, a psychic monument to a dream long dead. But perhaps both are true. Perhaps he is both alive and dead, both God and man, both savior and prisoner. He is the last candle in a sea of darkness, burning forever, unable to die, unable to rest. If the emperor could speak now, what would he say? Would he rage at his priests? Would he condemn the ecclesiarchy for twisting his dream? Would he mourn the countless lives lost in his name? Or would he forgive them, knowing that even this broken empire, this grim and bloody parody of his vision, is still better than extinction? Because even now, across 10,000 years of war, humanity endures. We live, we fight, we hope, and perhaps that is enough. There are whispers among the Inquisition that he stirs, that his light grows stronger, that he prepares to rise again. But the question remains, if he does awaken, will he find anything worth saving? Will he see the Imperium as his triumph or as his failure? No one knows. But if he does return, it will not be as a god. It will be as what he always was, a man standing against the dark, because that is what he has always been. Not divine, not infallible, not perfect, but human. The greatest human who ever lived. In the end, the Emperor is not just a figure of worship. He is a lesson. That enlightenment without compassion becomes tyranny. That power without love becomes monstrosity. And that even the brightest dream, without humility, becomes a cage. He saved humanity, but at the cost of his soul. He became immortal, but lost his voice. He became a god, but ceased to be a man. And yet, even broken, he endures. Because he must. Because we still need him. One day, perhaps, his eyes will open. The Astronomicon will flare brighter than ever before. The stars will tremble, and the voice of the Emperor will echo once more across the galaxy. Perhaps he will say, "My children, you have forgotten me." Or perhaps, "My children, you have done enough." Until that day, his dream lives on in every act of courage, in every spark of reason, in every moment a human chooses hope over despair. Because the Emperor was not just the greatest of men, he was the proof that man itself could be great. He sits upon the throne eternal, not as God, but as guardian, not for glory, but for love. Inscription beneath the golden throne, Terra. History will not remember me. It will remember him. That is enough. Malcador the Sigillite, First Lord of Terra. In a galaxy of gods and monsters, of primarchs and demons, there was once a single mortal who stood among them, and did not flinch, commanded no legion, bore no gene-forged strength. And yet, when the galaxy burned, he stood beside the Emperor himself and said, "You are not alone. In Capital City, before Imperium, before the Great Crusade, before even the unity of Terra, there were centuries of chaos, techno-barbarian warlords ruling over the ashes of civilization. Empires rose and fell like tides of blood. Science had become heresy. Then, humanity was dying. From the shadows came two men, one who would be God and one who would make him so. Parentheses, the Emperor, radiant, eternal, unknowable, sought to unite mankind through reason and strength. But it was Malcador, wise, mortal, patient, who taught him how to rule. Where the Emperor saw destiny, Malcador saw the cost. He became his friend, his counselor, his conscience. Some say Malcador was as old as the Emperor himself, a psyker of unimaginable power, who had lived since the dawn of humanity. Others say he was merely a man, who learned to see beyond time, who carried the weight of 1,000 forgotten ages. Whatever the truth, when the Emperor rose to unite Terra, Malcador was already there, waiting. It was Malcador who forged the alliances that birthed the Imperium. It was Malcador who negotiated with the Martian Mechanicum, who persuaded the lords of old Earth to kneel without war, who turned the warring tribes into a single nation beneath the imperial banner. He was not a general. He was the quiet voice behind every victory. While the Emperor commanded armies, Malcador built institutions. He created the foundations of the Administratum, the Inquisition, the Officio Assassinorum, and the Grey Knights. He wrote laws that would endure for 10,000 years. He planted the seeds of survival in the ashes of empire, and through it all, he remained humble. He never sought glory. He sought continuity. Because he knew what the Emperor did not. Dreams die without caretakers. During the Great Crusade, Malcador rarely left Terra. He was the steward of humanity's soul, ensuring that as the Emperor spread reason among the stars, the homeworld did not fall into madness. But he watched the Primarchs with concern. He loved them, in his own way, but he also feared them. He saw pride in Horus, rage in Angron, coldness in Perturabo, fanaticism in Lorgar. He warned the Emperor that they were too human, too flawed. The Emperor dismissed his concerns. He believed his sons would rise above such failings. Malcador said nothing more, but in the deep archives beneath the Imperial Palace, he began preparing contingencies. Because Malcador was not a dreamer. He was a realist. And he knew that no empire, not even one built by gods, would last forever. When the Horus heresy began, Malcador did not panic. He did not curse fate. He simply moved the pieces he had been setting for centuries. He summoned the loyalists to Terra. He reinforced the Imperial Palace. He whispered into the warp, calling forth allies that even the Emperor had forgotten. He created the Knights Errant, warriors chosen from across the loyal legions, united not by blood, but by purpose. From them, he would forge a new order, one that would endure even after the death of the Primarchs. The Grey Knights were born in silence, beneath the screams of a dying galaxy. When Horus's armies reached Terra, and the skies split open, Malcador did not take to the walls. He took to the throne room, the heart of the Emperor's final plan. For the Emperor's dream of salvation, the Webway project, was collapsing. The daemons were breaching its gates, pouring into the tunnels beneath the palace. If they reached the surface, all would be lost. The Emperor had to enter the warp personally to fight them, but to do that, someone had to take his place on the Golden Throne, to keep its machinery stable long enough for him to act. No one else could. No one else would survive. Malcador simply said, "I will do it." The Emperor warned him. He told him what it would mean, that his body would burn, his mind would shatter, his soul would be torn apart, that it was death in every sense that mattered. Malcador only smiled, that quiet, tired smile. "You built the dream. Let me hold it for you." Chapter 15. And so he left him there. Upon the golden throne of Terra, surrounded by the eternal machinery, the hum of ancient power filling the air like thunder, Malcador sat, a frail old man holding back the gods themselves. The moment the Emperor departed into the warp, the pressure began. It was not mere pain, it was annihilation. The throne's psychic conduits, designed for a god, began channeling through a mortal. The power of 1,000 suns burned through his body. His skin peeled away, his bones turned to dust, his thoughts scattered like ashes in a storm. But still he held. Still he focused. Still he believed. For 6 hours, Malcador endured. 6 hours of eternity. 6 hours of keeping the gates of hell shut with nothing but willpower. When the Emperor returned, wounded, dying, victorious, he found Malcador still upon the throne, smoke rising from what was left of him. And Malcador looked up, or perhaps the soul within him did, and whispered, "I kept it warm for you, my friend." Then he was gone. No remains, no ashes, only the faint smell of ozone and the echo of his voice. Malcador's death is not recorded in any official imperial chronicle. The ecclesiarchy barely speaks his name. The masses do not know he existed. And yet, without him, there would be no Imperium. There would be no emperor upon the throne. There would be no humanity left to worship either. He was the bridge between the divine and the mortal, the last true man to stand in a galaxy of monsters. He could have fled. He could have ruled in the emperor's absence. He could have made himself immortal through the warp, or taken the power he had gathered in secret. But he didn't. He chose service, because Malcador understood what few in the 41st millennium still remember, that heroism is not measured by glory. It is measured by sacrifice. In the centuries after the heresy, the institutions Malcador built became the spine of the Imperium. The Inquisition guards against corruption. The Grey Knights still fight in silence. The Administratum still feeds the engines of empire. They have all forgotten his name, but not his design. He foresaw it all. He built it to endure without him, because he knew the Emperor would never rise again. He knew the dream was doomed, and still he kept building. He was the caretaker of hope. Among inquisitors, there is a saying, "The Sigillite sleeps not, though his body be dust." Some claim his soul still whispers in the warp, guiding those who seek truth over power. Others believe he was reborn, scattered across the minds of those who question, those who doubt, those who dare to see the Imperium not as it is, but as it could have been. Perhaps that is true, because Malcador was never meant to be eternal in flesh. He was eternal in purpose. The Emperor is worshipped as a god. The Primarchs are remembered as angels. But Malcador was something rarer. He was good. He was the quiet strength behind every great act, the invisible hand that shaped the destiny of man. He was the first Inquisitor, the last scholar, the bridge between light and shadow. He saw the end coming and still walked toward it with eyes open. And in that, perhaps he surpassed even gods. No statue bears his true likeness. No prayer bears his name. But every time an imperial servant carries on in impossible darkness, every time a guardsman fights not for faith, but for duty, every time a scholar defends truth in a world of lies, that is Malcador's legacy. He is the part of humanity that still believes we can be more than what we've become. The story of the Imperium is not the story of gods. It is the story of a man who refused to let a god die alone. And that man's name was Malcador. There will come a day when even gods need friends. Fragment recovered from the Sigillite's journals. M31. In the quiet corners of Terra, beneath the cathedrals and vaults, there is said to be a single room still sealed since the heresy. Inside it sits a chair, empty, turned toward the throne. On the table beside it lies a single candle that has never gone out. They call it the Candle of the Sigillite, and it burns still, small, fragile, but eternal, just like him. When the last light fades, it will not be gods who save us. It will be men who remember what it means to care. Malcador the Sigillite. 10 names. 10 lives, 10 stories that shaped the fate of mankind. They did not fight for glory. They did not fight for eternity. They fought so that for one more heartbeat, humanity might live. From the Emperor upon his throne, to Malcador's dying light, to Sanguinius's broken wings and Vulkan's eternal fire. Their legacy endures, not in temples or prayers, but in us. For as long as we endure, as long as we still remember who we were, they have not fallen. They never will. Even in darkness, we are never truly alone, for their fire still burns within us.